Welcome to the deep dive. You asked us to unpack really one of the most compelling geopolitical moments in recent memory, the 2019 U.S.-North Korea summit in Hanoi.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The sources you sent show this really stark contrast, don't they? From that really intense pressure campaign back in 2017.
Right, the maximum pressure.
Exactly, to this incredibly high-stakes leader-to-leader diplomacy that sort of, well, it spectacularly collapsed in Vietnam.
It really did, and it makes it a perfect case study in that kind of transactional diplomacy. The first summit in Singapore, 2018, that was historic, sure, the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But Hanoi, February 27th and 28th, 2019, that was supposed to be the one that delivered something concrete, verifiable results.
And instead, boom, the working lunch canceled, no joint signing ceremony, it just ended. Sent shockwaves everywhere, really.
So our mission today is to trace that whole arc. We need to look at how we got from that global isolation strategy to the two leaders sitting down again.
And figure out why it fell apart. What were those core conflicting demands?
Exactly. And importantly, what were the consequences? The immediate geopolitical fallout of just walking away with no deal on the table.
Okay, so let's dive in. What was really at stake when they sat down in that, very elegant colonial hotel in Hanoi?
Well, to get why 2019 failed, I think we absolutely have to rewind a bit. Back to that big U.S.-Asia trip in November 2017. That's where the hardline approach really got formalized.
Right.
According to the sources, that trip had three main goals. First, unite the world against North Korea's nuclear program. Second, shore up alliances, the free and open Indo-Pacific idea. And third, and this is woven in tightly, insist on what the administration called fair and reciprocal trade.
Yeah, that 2017 trip, that was basically the official end of what people called strategic patience.
Right, era over.
Completely. The whole strategy flipped to maximum global pressure. And it wasn't just aimed at North Korea. They specifically called out China, Russia, demanding everyone fully implement UN sanctions.
Not just implement, but downgrade diplomatic ties.
Yeah.
Sever all trade and tech links.
Everything. The idea was to completely suffocate them economically, leave absolutely no breathing room.
And the key allies in the region, Japan and South Korea, they were fully on board at that point.
Oh, absolutely. The messaging was totally unified back then. You had Japanese Prime Minister Abe saying Japan and the U.S. were 100% together. He explicitly said, now is the time not for dialogue, but for applying maximum level of pressure.
Wow.
And same from South Korea's President Moon Jae-in. Maximize pressure, maximize sanctions until North Korea gives up the nukes. Total alignment.
It's interesting how that trade piece was folded in. It wasn't just about the nuclear threat. It was also this push to reshape trade deals.
Well, that's the crucial link, isn't it? The U.S. was tackling these big trade deficits, blaming, past administrations. And they'd already pulled out of the TPP, the big multilateral deal. So the focus shifted to bilateral deals, fair and reciprocal. It was like using economic leverage as part of the security strategy.
So restructure trade and use that economic muscle to enforce North Korea's isolation.
Exactly. The underlying logic seemed to be push Pyongyang towards economic collapse, and then eventually Kim Jong-un would have to come to the table ready to make a deal on U.S. terms.
Okay, so that was the foundation. Total isolation, maximum economic leverage.
Yeah.
Yet, less than a year after Singapore, despite all that, the leaders meet again in Hanoi. How did we even get from that really hard line back to a negotiating table?
Well, it's kind of a study in contradiction, isn't it? I mean, the tough talk never really stopped, but that personal channel between the leaders stayed open.
Right.
But beneath the surface, the signals were, let's say, deeply mixed, which must have created huge tension for the actual negotiators. Remember, after Singapore in 2018, the White House said there was no longer a nuclear threat.
Which sounds, well, completely disconnected from what the intelligence agencies were saying.
It was. While the political spin was all about peace, you had intel reports coming out saying North Korea was quietly still making nuclear fuel, that they had like 16 hidden missile bases.
Even while they were dismantling one site for show.
Right. And U.S. intel officials testified, this was early 2019, right before Hanoi, that full dismantling was, highly unlikely. So you had this real split screen. The political messaging versus the intelligence reality.
Which means the working level teams, the diplomats actually trying to hammer out details, they must have been dealing with huge gaps. Like, what does denuclearization even mean?
Exactly. The gaps were massive. Initially, the U.S. line was, we need a full inventory of everything North Korea has, nukes, missiles, the lot, right up front.
Which was always going to be a non-starter for Pyongyang.
Totally. But leading up to Hanoi, there were signs the U.S. might soften that. Maybe not demand the full list immediately. It suggested maybe a phased approach was possible, a big step, but maybe not everything all at once.
So you've got the leaders meeting, but the diplomatic homework isn't really done. Huge pressure for some kind of outcome. And then there's the sheer sort of political theater of it all, like Kim Jong-un taking that multi-day train trip to Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, the train across China, days and days. That wasn't just about travel logistics. That was a statement.
How so?
Well, analysts pointed out he might have been deliberately retracing the route his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, took back in 1958. It's about history, legitimacy, national strength. Especially traveling through Vietnam, another socialist country that had managed to normalize relations with the U.S., it was loaded with symbolism.
And then the venue itself in Hanoi, the old French colonial Hotel Metropole, it really set the stage for high drama, diplomacy as spectacle.
Absolutely. Iconic location, sky-high stakes. Everyone was kind of primed for a big success story.
And for a little while there, it really looked like it might happen.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the summit itself. February 27th and 28th, 2019, day one seemed, well, positive, right?
Yeah, totally optimistic. They had a one-on-one, a social dinner. The White House even, maybe a bit prematurely, announced they'd be signing a joint agreement the next afternoon.
They jumped the gun a bit.
A little bit, yeah. And the vibe continued into day two. Kim Jong-un was actually talking to reporters, which was unusual.
What did he say?
Well, someone asked about opening a U.S. liaison office in Pyongyang, and he said the idea was welcomable. And then crucially, when asked if he was ready to denuclearize, he said, "If I'm not willing to do that, I wouldn't be here right now."
Okay, that sounds like someone ready to deal.
It really did. Everything seemed pointed towards some kind of compromise.
But then, the cameras got pulled out, the working lunch was suddenly off, the signing ceremony just vanished.
Oof, gone.
The markets even reacted instantly. South Korean stocks dipped on the news. And what we're left with are two completely different stories about why it all fell apart.
And this is really the absolute core of it. The U.S. version, delivered by the president right after, was that the deal collapsed because North Korea demanded the U.S. lift all sanctions, like everything, in their entirety.
And the U.S. position was, that's too much, we can't do that.
Exactly. We had to walk away. Too much leverage given up for presumably not enough in return.
Okay, so that's the U.S. story. What about the North Koreans? They actually held a press conference, didn't they? Which is pretty rare.
Extremely rare. A late-night press conference. Their foreign minister, Ri Yong-ho, came out and directly contradicted the U.S. account. He said they only asked for partial sanctions relief.
Partial? How partial?
Specifically, he said they wanted relief from 5 key UN Security Council resolutions, the ones put in place between 2016 and 2017. Not all sanctions.
Oh.
And in return,
What was the offer?
they offered to permanently and completely dismantle their main nuclear facility at Yongbyon. And crucially, they said they'd allow American experts in to watch and verify it.
Okay, let's pause on Yongbyon. For listeners, why is that specific facility so important? What were they actually offering?
Yongbyon is huge. It's often called the heart, the absolute center of their nuclear weapons program. It's where they make the fissile material, the plutonium, and the highly enriched uranium that you need for bombs.
So taking that offline is a big deal.
It's a massive, verifiable step. It would essentially cap their ability to produce more material for new weapons. So what you had was this fundamental mismatch. North Korea offers the heart of the program for partial sanctions relief.
While the U.S. was apparently holding out for the entire body, all the nukes for sanctions relief, which maybe would only come at the end.
That seems to be the crux of it. The U.S. was pushing for this big deal.
But why? Why push so hard for everything at once when experts later said that was just unrealistic?
Well, you could argue it was a gamble, a high-stakes bet maybe on the personal relationship, on the momentum from Singapore. They might have been aiming for a huge historic win.
A legacy-defining deal.
Perhaps. But like the analysts pointed out, demanding a country give up its ultimate security guarantee, its nuclear weapons, all in one go, especially a country like North Korea that feels constantly under threat, it probably wasn't ever going to fly. It kind of ignores their whole security calculus.
Right. And then there was that other detail that emerged later. Something about a note being passed.
Ah, yes. The Libya model note. Post-summit reports confirmed the U.S. team gave Kim Jong-un a document that apparently laid out a plan for North Korea to basically transfer all its nuclear weapons and fuel, explicitly comparing it to the Libya model.
Okay, we need to unpack the Libya model. Why is bringing that up so problematic, maybe even disastrous, in talks with North Korea?
So the Libya model refers to 2003, when Muammar Gaddafi agreed to completely give up Libya's nuclear and chemical weapons programs. He shipped everything out. In return, Libya got sanctions relief, normalization.
Sounds like a success story from a U.S. perspective.
For Washington, yes, it's seen as a template for full disarmament. But for Pyongyang, it's the exact opposite. It's a cautionary tale.
Because Gaddafi gave up his WMD, and then what happened?
He was overthrown and killed during the Arab Spring uprising in 2011, with NATO intervention playing a role. So from North Korea's perspective, the lesson is crystal clear. Gaddafi gave up his ultimate deterrent, and his regime didn't survive. For them, nukes equal survival.
So mentioning Libya to Kim Jong-un wasn't just clumsy diplomacy. It could have been seen as confirming their deepest fears about U.S. intentions. Like, give up your nukes, and then we'll come for you.
It likely torpedoed any remaining trust. It shifts the discussion from technical bargaining to something existential.
And then finally, there was that really difficult moment in the post-summit press conference about Otto Warmbier, the American student who died after being detained in North Korea.
Yeah, that was awkward, to say the least. The U.S. president said he took Kim Jong-un at his word, that Kim didn't personally know about Warmbier's treatment.
Which caused a huge backlash back home.
It really highlighted the inherent tension in this kind of very personalized diplomacy. Building trust leader to leader is one thing, but it risks overshadowing or seeming to excuse, major human rights issues or other core national security concerns. It was a very jarring moment for a lot of people watching.
So, Hanoi collapses spectacularly. Two completely different stories about why. What happens next? Does everything just snap back to maximum pressure? Does the relationship just die?
Well, the immediate signs weren't good. Just days after the summit, satellite images showed renewed activity at the Sohae satellite launching station.
A site they were supposedly dismantling.
Exactly. It looked like reconstruction or reassembly. It was a pretty clear signal from Pyongyang. Okay, no deal. We can go back to building things you don't like.
And the criticism of the U.S. big deal strategy really ramped up then.
Oh, yeah. Analysts piled on, basically saying that holding out for everything, total denuclearization for total sanctions relief, was just unrealistic, maybe even strategically dumb. The argument was that progress would only come through smaller steps.
Phased agreements.
Right. Aim for, smaller, workable deals, build some trust through actual diplomatic spadework, not just these high-profile summits.
Which brings us to working-level dialogue. What does that actually look like compared to the drama in Hanoi?
It's the opposite of the spectacle. It's the slow, often tedious work done by experienced diplomats, technical experts. They get into the weeds of verification, timelines, sequencing, figuring out exactly what concession A gets you in terms of step B.
Less glamour, more grind.
Precisely. Frank Ullum, a well-known North Korea expert, suggested focusing on attainable things first, like maybe a formal declaration ending the Korean War, or verifying the shutdown of specific sites we already know about, like Yongbyon or the Punggye-ri test site, or the Dongchangri engine test stand. Small wins to build momentum, rather than demanding the whole arsenal up front.
Okay, so if the talks collapsed so badly, and the core disagreement was still there, how did the diplomatic track not just completely break down? How did they end up meeting again?
It's actually kind of surprising, but that personal channel, the leader-to-leader connection, it seemed to hold up. Even after the public failure in Hanoi, the communication didn't stop.
The beautiful letters.
Exactly. Trump and Kim kept exchanging letters, described as beautiful and excellent. It showed they were trying to keep that personal link alive, even if the policy was stuck.
And that led to the DMZ meeting.
Right. In June 2019, they met at the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. It was largely symbolic, obviously, but it did result in an agreement, at least publicly, to restart those working-level talks. The personal touch somehow survived the massive policy gap exposed in Hanoi.
So Hanoi really wasn't just a negotiation failure. It feels more like it exposed the absolute limits of that highly personalized, transactional style of diplomacy when the fundamental positions, all sanctions versus all nukes, were just miles apart.
That's got to be the main takeaway, right? The 2017 strategy was about using global pressure to isolate North Korea completely. But the 2019 summit failed because they couldn't translate that pressure into one single decisive deal. They couldn't bridge that gap between the U.S. wanting all for all and North Korea's offer of basically Yongbyon for partial relief.
We saw this push for a dramatic big deal just lead to an abrupt end. But then the fact that the leaders kept writing letters, met again at the DMZ, it suggests the relationship wasn't totally dead.
It leaves us with this really interesting tension.
Yeah. So here's a final thought for you, the listener. We saw the high-stakes leader-level drama failed to produce a lasting policy breakthrough in Hanoi, but the personal connection kept some kind of channel open. What is this tension between the flashy personalized summitry and the slow, unglamorous technical work of actual negotiation? Tell us about the best way forward. How viable are these big top-level summits for achieving real, verifiable peace, especially when maybe the detailed groundwork hasn't been fully laid? Think about that gap between what they covered and what was actually ready to be agreed upon.